Babs, this shit crazy. Jimmy on the beat, boy.
This is the Trophy Room, aka Trophy Room Radio. I am your host, Brett Hammer. Wherever you are on this Monday morning, getting back to work, thank you for making me a part of your day and welcome in. Coming up, did the big bad in the NFL just lose their biggest weapon? Plus, is it finally time to admit that the NIL is a failed system? And why is Ed Reed blowing up your feed today? We will get into all of that. All of that is coming up. But first, it is way too tough to buy quality graphic tees these days. You know what I'm talking about. You look it up and all you get is sketchy third-party websites and sketchy products on Etsy and eBay, and none of it's real, none of it's quality. But Game Changers is throwing a wrench into all of that. Game Changers is a real company that puts quality behind the phrase, you get what you pay for. They make high-end quality shirts with all your favorite NBA and NFL teams and players, as well as rappers and other culture icons. If you head over to GameChangers.la right now, you can use promo code HAMMERTIME23 for $10 off. That's capital H, HAMMERTIME23 for $10 off your next order. And if you have any issues, their customer service is absolutely incredible. I accidentally shipped wearing my Calvin Johnson shirt right now under the sweatshirt. I just ordered a Deion Sanders throwback shirt from Game Changers, and I got it sent to the wrong address on accident, and within 5 minutes emailed them, they responded, they took care of it, sent it to the right address. So they're absolutely incredible. Go to GameChangers.la, use promo code HAMMERTIME23 for $10 off. Speaking of things that are on the come up though, we are sponsored by the good people over at Jim Candy Gummies. So head over to jimcandygummies.com on Instagram or TikTok and go and test out the product that is revolutionizing the pre-workout market. Go change your workouts. Absolutely incredible. Also, follow me on Instagram and on TikTok at BHammerTime, letter B, HammerTime with 2 E's at the end instead of 1. If you follow us there, then you know we've been posting. Look, I'm not a whiz at this yet. I am not a wannabe social media influencer yet, but we did figure out, I feel like, how to make some quality videos, and I think we posted almost every single day last week as far as clips from the podcast. And if you want to watch the video version of this, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever, head over to YouTube, Trophy Room Radio. If you want to watch, if you want to see the setup, look, I'm adulting now. I have my TV in my room, which you can't see, but you can see this Xbox that's hooked up here to the shelf. That's how I know I'm an adult. I've never had a TV in my room before at 24 now, and I finally do. But yeah, you can come and you can watch the video. We don't do it live, but we have it on YouTube, posted after the fact. You can come watch, hang out, see the setup. I have a table built out of a mattress pad box and 3 Nike boxes as my little desk here. So we're killing it. But yeah, go follow me at BHammerTime, Instagram, TikTok, Trophy Room Radio, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube now. All of it is, we're working on all of it. We're not pros yet, but we're going to get there soon. Also, I want to appreciate, just shout out a little bit. Some of you guys messaged me last week about just different things that you'd like me to talk about more. I got a lot of messages about the NBA, so I apologize to Uncle Andy that we're going to be bringing the NBA up here a little bit. In all reality, y'all, it's not that he doesn't like basketball. He's just bitter because he's from Seattle, and ever since the Supersonics got pulled, he's just never been the same. So I'm really interested to know what has changed with the Brooklyn Nets, because I feel like 3 years in, we're like, hey, this is a tank job. This is a failed system. Kyrie, Ben Simmons, KD, not all going to work together. And now they're 4th in the Eastern Conference. So we won't get into that today because we had too many playoffs to talk about. But we will get into the NBA slowly but surely, especially as football season is going to be slowing down here a little bit. But the NBA is coming, and thank you guys so much for just reaching out, sending me messages about stuff that you want to hear about, talk about, that we can get done together. So I appreciate that. Another shout out. So you guys know, if you've been hanging out with the Trophy Room for a while, then you know Jackson. Jackson used to hang out here with us, and he used to do everything. And I don't even know if Jackson is watching today, but I just wanted to give Jackson a huge shout out because Jackson is the reason that we have access to video editing software. He's the reason I have this tripod. He's the reason I didn't want to do this right after my dad passed away. But Jackson hopped right in, and he was there with me every step of the way to just do this and be there for whatever I needed. So huge shout out to Jackson. I'm so grateful for everything that he does. He also created some of our little interstitials and the little glowing trophy room that you see at the end of our TikToks. He also created that. So huge shout out to Jackson. He's half the reason this thing is still going, and he's never asked for a dime. So I really appreciate that from him. We do have a couple of things to talk about today. I was a little unsure with where to go with because I do want to talk about, obviously, we talk about mostly football here. But I did want to talk about the Jaden Rashada thing, as well as the Ed Reed deal, because I didn't really understand what was going on with the whole Ed Reed thing, and I've done a little bit of research to hook you up with helping you understand this smaller story that maybe you hear whisperings of and you're not really sure what's going on. So we're going to get to that with you. Here's the first thing, though. The 49ers go out, take down the Dallas Cowboys last night, and we'll get to the Cowboys because that is a broken hot mess. But the San Francisco 49ers are the perfect example of why we love sports. We've had two scenarios this year where someone who had no business being in a championship game, this is the second time two guys have made it. Both of them probably sub 6'1", white, sneaky athletes. Stetson Bennett, Brock Purdy. If you know me, you know that I don't think that Brock Purdy is the second coming of Tom Brady, even though some people would like you to believe so. I think Brock Purdy is the most elite system quarterback of all time. That's what I think Brock Purdy is. But I do think that it's incredible. This is why we love sports. I have a friend, and his girlfriend absolutely hates football. She thinks it's the biggest waste of time. And every time my friends and I will watch, she just loves to walk by and nag about it, which is really ironic. But it's incredible because we get stories like this. Everything in life is just a story. Everything in life, it's just a story. And we got superhero stories. We have football stories. We have ballroom dancing stories. We have war stories. Everything is just a story. And the age-old, time-old story is the come from nothing to become everything. And Brock Purdy is a perfect example of that. Brock Purdy went from 4-year starter at Iowa State, like, round of applause, you did great, kid. Nobody ever thought he would be anything. He was the last pick in the draft, Mr. Irrelevant. I went through just to read off to you guys some of the people who were taken with the last pick in the draft, and unless you're a fan of any of these schools, you don't know who any of these people are. The only other one that I recognized was Ryan Suckup, who's a kicker in the NFL. Brock Purdy is the reason that we love football, because we love people who defeat the odds and end up on top. And that's Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy has never asked for anything. He's never said, I was so doubted. He doesn't have the Baker Mayfield chip on his shoulder. He's a Stetson Bennett of the NFL. Like, this is a movie. The guy nobody wanted sat behind a first-round quarterback, sat behind another guy who took this same team to a Super Bowl, and he's going to an NFC championship. Competed in one of the coolest postseason rivalries that we have in sports. 49ers and Cowboys are tied for most postseason games ever played. And he's going to go to an NFC championship game. How cool is that? Can you imagine? Like, I feel like he's just a regular Joe. And he is going to compete. And not only compete, but he hasn't done anything to lose them a football game. There's not been a single moment with Brock Purdy outside of one throw, his first or second throw against the Seahawks, where he did anything that worried you. And now they're going to go to an NFC championship game. And the coolest thing about that is I think it says so much about Kyle Shanahan. Because I don't know if it's because Andy pointed it out to us, but there is truth in the idea that some people believe in coaching more than others. I was one of those who didn't buy the shenanigan at all, and now, as the more I watch it, I watch football from a coaching perspective, which is why about all we did last week was talk about Brandon Staley and why the Los Angeles Chargers are a failure as a result of his coaching. But the cool thing here is that Kyle Shanahan is the best coach in the NFL, and it's not even close. Look at the rest of the teams who are in the playoffs. Oh, there goes my charger. Look at the rest of the teams that are in the playoffs. Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL, maybe one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. The Bengals, the second best quarterback in the NFL. I think the second coming of Tom Brady, just in terms of not winning 6 Super Bowls, but just how he plays the game, which we'll get into later on in the show. And then Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts, say what you want for the last 2-3 seasons. Jalen Hurts is an MVP candidate this season. And then you have Brock Purdy. Now, I think, obviously, we know what kind of coach Andy Reid is. We know what kind of coach Zach Taylor is. I don't know that we know what kind of coach Nick Sirianni is. I still kind of think he's an idiot. But the Eagles are successful regardless. But then you have the 49ers. The 49ers are the only ones competing for a championship title. For a conference title, without a special quarterback. Again, Brock Purdy's good. He's not special. And if he is special, we have not seen enough tape to say that he's definitively special. He's good. He's great. I'm not discounting him. But Lamar Jackson won the MVP, looked like he was going to break the entire league, and then they figured out how to slow him down the season after that. Kyle Shanahan is a perfect example of a once-in-a-generation coach. Maybe twice in a generation, because we also have Andy Reid. But to me, those guys are pretty similar. Kyle Shanahan's younger. And it's so cool to see that the differences, right? Because every single one of these teams is a little bit different. I would argue that the Bengals and the Chiefs are more one guy, one coach doing everything, or carrying majority of the load. And then you have the 49ers and the Eagles that are more team-centric. But if this doesn't show you that Kyle Shanahan is the best coach in the NFL, I don't know what does. He's the only guy in the playoffs without an MVP candidate at quarterback. And some could argue that they're probably the second best team left. Like, full team, they're the second best team. And they're definitely the most dangerous defense left in these playoffs. The Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen yesterday said the season was a failure. Is he right? Part of me wants to say absolutely it's a failure, because if you're favored to win the Super Bowl at the beginning of the season, and then you not only don't win the Super Bowl, you almost lose your wild card game to a team with a third-string quarterback, and then you do lose at home in the divisional round after not making the conference title last season, yeah, that's a failure. But Tony Dungy, the great Tony Dungy, said there's no winning or losing. It's winning or learning. Because if you're not learning when you're losing, then what are you doing? If you watched the game yesterday, tell me this. I really feel like Josh Allen let all of the outside pressure finally get to him. I felt like he heard everything that Nick Wright said. Felt like he heard everything that a lot of you guys said. Because whatever the opposite of trigger happy is, that's what Josh Allen was yesterday. He was the complete opposite of trigger happy. He was about as stable with his arm as they come. It almost felt like he was afraid to throw the football, because he was afraid of turning it over. Like, you just watch, he held on for way too long, and he ended up getting sacked a bunch as a result. The funny thing is, though, for as much crap as everyone wants to give Josh Allen for how bad he was last year, or this last season, and I agree, the season's a failure if you don't win that game yesterday, which they don't. But if you want to see something funny, let's go look at this. Let's go look at the 2021 regular season. 2021 regular season. Interesting. Patrick Mahomes, 12-5, 66% completion percentage, 37 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Well, let's go see what Josh Allen was. Regular season. This season, where everyone says that he's regressed and that he's trash. Josh Allen won 13 games, 63% completion, 35 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. So 2 interceptions more, 2 less touchdowns, more yards, couple completion percentages lower, and 1 more game. Interesting. Everyone wants to say that Josh Allen fell off. Josh Allen had a really bad stretch in the middle of the season that we all remembered that kind of clouded the rest of the regular season and definitely clouded the playoffs, so much so that I think the pressure finally got to him. But don't tell me that Josh Allen is regressed, that he's mid, that he may have fallen off when he did basically exactly what Patrick Mahomes did last year. And everyone wanted to call Patrick Mahomes an MVP candidate. Nobody was saying, oh, Patrick Mahomes has regressed. Patrick Mahomes has fallen off. Yeah, sorry, he didn't look like he was the greatest of all time for one season. It's okay. You can have, like, everybody goes through ups and downs, right? Not everyone is 100% their best every single year. Sometimes you have a 98% year. Sometimes you have a 90% year. Sometimes you go to work. You're going to go to work today. You might have a 75% day. Doesn't mean you fell off. It just means it's Monday. And I'm tired of people telling me that Josh Allen fell off. Look, he had a bad game yesterday. Let's be honest about that. The Bills couldn't rush the ball. Didn't really seem like they wanted to. And Josh Allen had 0 passing touchdowns. But then you have this whole debacle where Stephon Diggs is getting into beef with Josh Allen on the sideline. Then first of all, we know that Stephon Diggs is just an emotional guy. That's not a surprise to anyone. And if it is, it shouldn't be. Stephon Diggs is complaining. Stephon Diggs was targeted 10 times. Which, if you throw the ball 30 times a game, that's a third of all, that's a third of your targets. Stephon Diggs was targeted more than anyone else in that football game. The most targets by a single player on the Bengals side was 8. So it's not that Josh Allen wasn't looking for Stephon Diggs. The Bengals just did a great job of locking Diggs down. And I think the Bengals are a lot better than people want to give them credit for. And as a result, they went out and balled out and beat the Bills. But some people, this game led them to believe that that Sean McDermott needs to be fired. Next year, maybe. But can any of us say that we're really surprised that the Bills didn't win the Super Bowl this year? Because I'm not. I didn't feel like they were going to win it. I don't know if they were still emotionally shaken up from the Damar Hamlin thing. I don't know what the deal is, but I didn't feel like they were going to win the Super Bowl this year. And I don't think that it's fair. Look, the defense was atrocious yesterday. And again, Sean McDermott's supposed to be a defensive head coach. Defense was down bad. But last year and the year before, you were saying, look at what Sean McDermott has done. They haven't been relevant in 20 plus years. And now Sean McDermott's taking them to AFC title or to divisional rounds, almost making to AFC title games. And let's be honest, for everyone who wants to give the LeBron had to play the Warriors, because people love that. If you want to say, oh, well, LeBron only has this many titles, LeBron fans love to say, oh, well, he had to play the Warriors, and Michael Jordan never had to play the Warriors. Okay, well, guess what? A lot of these guys, especially if you're in the NFC, you don't have to play the Chiefs. You don't have to play Joe Burrow. The best quarterbacks in the NFL, they're all in the AFC, and you don't have to play those guys in the playoffs. So pump the brakes a little bit, because I get that the Bills struggled with the Dolphins. But Joe Burrow is the second best quarterback in the NFL. And there's no shame in losing to Tom Brady. There's no shame in losing to Patrick Mahomes. There sure as heck is not shame in losing to Joe Burrow. So I don't think that it's fair that we're going to say, yeah, Sean McDermott only made it to the divisional round 2 years in a row, taking the team from... I feel like we've just gotten so sensitive and so needy for instant gratification that we're like, oh, you know what? You took us from winning 6 games a season to going to only divisional rounds. Yeah, you're fired. Again, the defense was bad. I get it. But we were giving him credit and hyping him up last year and the year before for the way that he's turned this football team around. I think it's fair to give him one more year. Because the other thing is, okay, you fire Sean McDermott. Then what? Unless you're sure that Sean Payton is going to take the job, just because you fire someone doesn't guarantee that it's going to be an upgrade. This isn't an AT&T commercial. Sean Payton's the only one that is maybe a guaranteed upgrade, and you don't even know. There's no guarantees in life. There's certainly no guarantees in the NFL. People love to play, well, if this person was in this situation, then they would be successful. You don't know that. I think so, probably, but that is not a guarantee. I love Sean Payton. Sean Payton still struggled with Drew Brees at the end of his career before he retired. That's all I have to say. Let's give him one more year, because the other thing is, I think Brian Daboll meant a lot more to this team than people realize. We talked about that a little bit a couple months ago. But to me, the drop-off from the Bills and the increase from the Giants, I don't know if it's completely congruent, but I would like to believe that there's truth in the idea that some of that winning, some of that talent on offense went with Brian Daboll, and they got to find a way to recoup that. So I say you give Sean McDermott one more year. Unfortunately, that probably takes you out of the window to hire Sean Payton. But best case scenario, Sean McDermott balls out next year. They go to an AFC title game and hopefully a Super Bowl, and then we kind of put this whole thing behind us. You guys know what the meta is? I'm not talking about the metaverse. If you have kids or you know any 13-year-olds, I promise you they can tell you what the meta is. I used to live with 2 13-year-olds. And I'm not talking about my little brothers. I'm talking about my roommates, Carter and Tyler. I love them. Bless their heart. I learned new words every other day. I felt like when they were speaking in TikTok language to me, I was learning a new language. More so than when I was learning Spanish in Canada. But the meta, I believe, is a video game term. And so like the meta would be how you choose to build a certain piece of your game so that when you take it into online play, like it's basically how is the game designed for you to be the most successful, and then you play that way. That's kind of the deal. It's like a lot of times again, talk to kids, they'll tell you, they'll be like, oh, this loadout in Fortnite, that's the meta. Or because you can build guns a certain way in Call of Duty. I don't play, so I don't totally understand, but you can build guns a certain way and like with certain attachments and everything, and they'll be like, oh, that's the meta. The Eagles are the meta. We talked about this a couple minutes ago, but the 4 of these teams that are left in the NFL playoffs, they're different, but they're also extremely effective. I think the NFC is more sustainable and more replicable, even though the 49ers and Eagles, while similar, aren't entirely the same. But if you want to win a Super Bowl, you don't have a generational quarterback or coach. The Eagles are how you do it. Because with the Bengals, we have a generational quarterback. The Chiefs, we have generational quarterback and generational coach and probably generational tight end, all of whom I think work really well together, which tease we'll get to later. And then the 49ers, I don't know if Christian McCaffrey's generational. I don't know if Kittle's generational. I love Nick Bosa. Don't know if he's generational. Kyle Shanahan's generational. But guess what? But you look at the Eagles and you say, what about the Eagles is generational? What about the Eagles is like, we'll never see this again? Jalen Hurts. Look, I'm a Jalen Hurts guy. I love me some Jalen Hurts. We'll see him again. Nick Sirianni. Well, the guy was going for 2 when they were up by 3 touchdowns, and he was trying to bait them into jumping off sides so that you could gain 1 more yard. Because whatever play you got drawn up, if you're going to run a quarterback sneak from the 2, didn't really make any sense to me. And then a fake punt where you were going to QB sneak it to your safety. I'm not totally sold on Nick Sirianni. Like Devonta Smith, like A.J. Brown, like Quez Watkins. The only thing you might be able to say about them that's generational is the offensive line. The thing you definitely could say is generational is the defensive line. But if you look at the defensive line, you say, wait, well, Nick Bosa doesn't play there. T.J. Watt doesn't play there. Aaron Donald doesn't play there. The elite offensive or defensive edge rushers and defensive standouts, they don't play for the Eagles. The Eagles just have a lot of really, really good guys. They don't have a lot of DPOYs outside of Hassan Reddick, but I would argue Hassan Reddick looks the way he does. Look, with defense, this is the deal. I feel like a lot of life is chicken and egg, and you just guess which side you're on. A lot of life is like that. Defense is certainly like that. Because there are some people who will say, we call it a coverage sack for a reason, right? Well, a coverage sack is when there's nobody open and the quarterback has time, but the guys get home anyway. But I think the opposite is also true. I don't know if you can call it sack coverage, but sometimes if you're a corner, you don't even have to be that good. If the pass rush gets home, your job is done for you. And the thing that's so crazy about the Eagles is that the linebacking core is okay, but the pass rush is so good. They have 4 guys with 10-plus sacks. They had 70 sacks, which is the 3rd most ever in a regular season. That's generational. But again, they didn't draft a T.J. Watt. They didn't draft a Nick Bosa. They didn't draft an Aaron Donald. They signed a Ndamukong Suh. They signed Robert Quinn. They signed Hassan Reddick. They drafted Josh Sweat, drafted Brandon Graham. They picked up a lot of really good guys, and you put that many guys together who don't all need to be making top-tier money, you go put the meta together. And then you put the cream of the crop on top. That's the other thing. Like they win the line of scrimmage on both sides. They're a perfect example of that. They got Pro Bowlers all over the offensive line. Jordan Mailata, Jason Kelsey, and then obviously Lane Johnson's a stud. They win the line of scrimmage. And then also, here's the key to it all. And I think I mentioned this probably 2 or 3 times a show, so if you want me to stop, I won't. But they don't have to pay a quarterback. People don't realize how big of a deal that is in the NFL. I've been studying the salary cap a little bit recently because it's so complicated. I don't even understand it. But the more that you look at this, the more you realize a lot of your money goes away when you pay a quarterback. And it makes it hard to pay a lot of really good guys. So you basically do this thing where you pay someone for value here, but then you also have to pay someone for value here. Because you just can't afford here. I realize hand gestures aren't really working if you're listening to the podcast, but you get what I'm saying. They are the meta. Rookie contract quarterback. Pro Bowl offensive line. Sacks on defense. And then a good secondary with Darius Slay and James Bradbury. And guess what? Darius Slay and James Bradbury are not Pat Surtain and Sauce Gardner. Both those guys are up there in age a little bit. But the secondary complements the sacks. And as a result, they're hard to score the football on, as you saw with the Giants on Saturday night. Okay, so Jaden Rashada. So I want to talk about this because NIL has always been a little bit scary. Because it's so wild, wild west. And when NIL first started, because we talked about paying players for a long time, which I'm for if it's done in the right way. We talked about paying for players for a long time, And then I think once the floodgates opened, everyone was like, oh, we'll just sign people and then we'll see how NIL works after the fact, but we got to get the deals in place first. So Jaden Rashada signs a deal with an NIL collective for the University of Florida and signs his national letter of intent to go to the University of Florida late last year. He's offered a deal for 4 years at $13 million to play at the University of Florida. And you say, well, how does that work? How is it that if schools aren't allowed to pay the players, how can they guarantee that a guy goes to a school? Well, this is how. Because they don't say you have to attend the University of Florida in order to receive this deal. They're not allowed to do that. But what they do say is, in order to receive your money, you have to live in a certain zip code. That zip code being the location of the school. Also, 4 years, $13 million. It's making more than some NFL players. Or so we thought. The deal fell through because some executives of this NIL collective didn't know that the deal had been upped from $5 million to $13 million, and so then they pulled it. Well, so then Jaden Rashada says, well, if I'm not going to get my deal, then I'm not playing for Florida. I don't think college should be a boat primarily for you to make money. That being said, I'm all for everyone making this money. Like, I'm all for making as much money on this podcast, as much money at work as I possibly can. I'm all for capitalism. Everyone should make as much money as possible. But if you spend so much time, if you're going on a road trip and you're really craving a certain food, you might waste an hour trying to find an In-N-Out before you even get to the freeway just to waste time on an overhyped burger when you could have spent that hour on the road. And I worry that a lot of these kids are getting put into positions where they say, well, I got to get my money before I can go to school. And I'm for that, especially $13 million, $5 million, $1 million. Are you kidding? Of course. But the issue that we're running into is you have Jaden Rashada, a top quarterback commit, who gets into this deal with this school, and now he says, I'm not getting my money, so I want to leave. First of all, I don't like the lesson that we teach kids with this, that you don't have to make commitments. You just up and leave whenever you want. We already have the transfer portal. But it's a scary world that we're living in when people are only going to college for money. You're turning this into a semi-pro model. And the thing that these kids have to understand, these businessmen and women, these collectives, they are not in the business of giving charity. They're in the business of them making money. They're in the business of you making them money. And that's the part that I don't get is all is fair in love and war. All is not fair with business people. They are there to milk you for money. That is it. So whatever their dollar amount is, whatever their profit margins is, that's what you are. They're not here to help these kids. And again, I'm all for getting the money. And we talked about the floodgates open in the beginning. People just signed whoever they could. I think business people are starting to realize, okay, we didn't do things the best way that we could. We learned things about NIL the first little bit that we did it, but we didn't make money the way we thought our margins would. And I think they're starting to realize that, and you're starting to have guys like this where it's like, some of these kids are getting, I don't want to say taken advantage of because you signed the deal. You knew where you were going into. Anytime you make a money move, you got to understand there's a winner and there's a loser. Always. There's never only winners in business deals. Somebody has to get screwed over. Somebody gets more money. Someone gets more money for less work. That's just how it works. NIL is a scary, scary world. And this Jaden Rashada thing is a great example of that. Speaking of raw deals, being a Cowboys fan has to be one of the hardest jobs on planet Earth. Because every single season, they find a way to tell you that you're going to go to a Super Bowl this year. I feel like that's all Cowboys fans do. Is they just say, I'm going to watch this game so that I can know what from this game is going to tell me that I'm going to a Super Bowl this year? Which is funny because in the last 27 years, they have 5 playoff wins. So, you've barely won enough games to make it, like 5 playoff wins in the last 27 years. If you're not the 1 seed, you have to win 3 playoff games just to get to a Super Bowl, 4 wins to win a Super Bowl in the playoffs. In the last 27 years, you barely have enough wins for that. I don't know how Cowboys fans stay optimistic, especially when we talked about there was writing on the wall for this. Now, it didn't end as badly or as entertainingly as I would have liked, but Brett Maher, that kick was blocked, and 49ers were genius for messing with him during pregame warmups. The funny part is, though, it's actually better that it was blocked because he was going to shank that thing anyway. And the funnier thing is that the Cowboys are almost a guaranteed loss when Dak throws the football over 30 times. And they forced Dak to throw the football yesterday. Again, it's the 49ers defense. You're not messing with that D-line and those linebackers. You're definitely not messing with Tuafanga. That Pro Bowl safety, he's legit. He trains with Troy Polamalu and he's bigger. But the thing that I find the most interesting is that the NFL draft is all about getting value, right? You need guys that will pan out, and most guys who get drafted don't pan out. It's just the way it is. But the Cowboys draft more Pro Bowlers than anyone else, and they still find a way to overpay for 2 of the most mediocre guys in the league. I'm not saying they're bad. They're not bad. Zeke's not a bad running back. Dak's not a bad quarterback. But I feel like we're moving into this world where we're overpaying people for what they do. We're paying people at McDonald's way more than what we should. And that's how I feel. I feel like McDonald's, or Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott are McDonald's employees, where they're being way overpaid for their level of work. And the only reason, you got to understand this, the only reason the Cowboys can even compete is because they're so good at drafting. They're so good. Say what you want about Trayvon Diggs. He's definitely a top corner in the NFL. He's not the best corner in the NFL, but he's a top corner in the NFL. Drafted Leighton Vander Esch. Drafted Micah Parsons. They draft studs, and they're smart enough to pay offensive line. They drafted Tony Pollard. Drafted Michael Gallup. Drafted CeeDee Lamb. All these guys have hit. Can you imagine how much better they would be if they didn't overpay for Dak? And honestly, Zeke's not necessary. You have Tony Pollard. I don't understand with the Dallas Cowboys how they think that they're going to find success, because insanity is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. The Cowboys are doing the same thing for the last 30 years. And every single year they expect a different result, and every single year they don't get one. Part of it is because they're overpaying for Deke and Zach. Zach and Deke. Dak and Zeke. Zeke and Luther, question mark. But then, the Cowboys did decide to give us a little Cowboys-esque entertainment with that final play at the end of the game. I don't know what that was, but I guess they figured, well, Zeke, if we're going to pay you that much money, then you're also going to play center. I'm not really sure how they thought that was going to go because he got absolutely bowled over. I guess they were trying to run a pitch around, but obviously that wasn't going to happen with the way Zeke was lined up. With the guy who was lined up on the other side of Zeke. I don't know why, but Zeke and Dak are now living like dyslexia in my head right now. I like Dak. He's the 15th best quarterback in the league. Maybe 12th. But he's overpaid. We absolutely tanked the NFL contracts when we started overpaying for guys like Dak. Dak had 3 games this year without an interception. Only 3 without an interception. Josh Allen had 8. For a guy that everyone says turns the ball over more than anyone else, Josh Allen had 8 games without an interception. Mahomes had 9. I don't know if Dak has to go, but Zeke certainly does, because Zeke is costing you way too much money to not win playoff games. But again, I don't know what the Cowboys' identity is. I know part of it's choking. I know part of it's entertaining us at the end of games in the most unfortunate way possible. I feel like the Cowboys are the real-life Impractical Jokers, where they're like, dude, wouldn't it be so funny if we did this? It's really dumb and we don't mean it, but we're just going to do it for entertainment for the public. And then the Cowboys go and do that thing. Dude, wouldn't it be so funny if we took Zeke Elliott and we lined him up at center and then we watched him get absolutely plastered by a defensive lineman to fake try and run a pitch play? Wouldn't that be so funny? Hey, wouldn't it be so funny if our kicker missed the easiest play in all of football 4 times in a row and then missed his first field goal in the game after that? Wouldn't that be so funny? The Cowboys, I feel like, are legitimately the real-life Impractical Jokers. Wouldn't it be so funny if we way overpaid for a mediocre running back, a position that has never panned out, paying high dollar to? That's all I'm saying. It's absolutely ridiculously entertaining with what the Cowboys do. Ed Reed. This one's wild. I didn't really get what was going on. I saw his videos on Instagram, social media and stuff, but I didn't really understand what's going on, so I went and read through the story. So I'm here to update y'all. I want to start out saying I think there's another level to this story. I just don't think we're privy to it. There's a couple reasons I say that. So, first one, at my house growing up, if we ever had guests over, and I think this was like early 2000s, early 2010s thing, because when I was growing up, we didn't just like and my cousins, my family will tell you this, like, we weren't allowed to wear basketball shorts to school, and I would assume that's probably the case for a lot of you guys. Like, we had to wear jeans, had to wear cargo shorts, had to wear those ugly plaid shorts. We're gonna look back in 10 years and be like, why did we wear those? We made some interesting choices. I mean, I think it's the same way that we look back and say, like, why were kids outside playing in dress slacks and button-up shirts? You just learn as time goes on. But at my house growing up, in addition to those ugly plaid shorts, if we ever had guests over, we always had to clean the house. Always. And it was so annoying, especially if it was people that we didn't really care that much about. If we were excited for who was coming, we didn't mind cleaning. But if we ever had guests over at my house, we always cleaned. So part of this Ed Reed thing from the story that we're getting started with Ed Reed shows up close to when the deal was being finalized, riding around campus on a golf cart, and there's trash all over the field, trash all over the facilities, and get this, there's trash in his office. Trash all over his office from what he said. Now, the reason the university is so upset about it is because following finding all that trash, Ed Reed made a video full of expletives about how ridiculous it was that there was trash everywhere. And there's a bunch of people who are yelling at Ed Reed, saying you shouldn't be complaining about HBCUs, you shouldn't be attacking them, this, that, and the other thing. I'm not a part of HBCU culture, obviously, so I'm not going to speak to that. But here's what I will say. All I know is if I had an NFL Hall of Famer coming to my house, I'm making sure that my house is clean. If I'm trying to hire him, if I'm trying to convince him to come work for me, A, everyone's office should be cleaned anyway. Your room should be cleaned. But B, I'm a no-name college. Like, let's be real. You're not Alabama. You're not Texas A&M. You're not Georgia. You're not a big-time Power 5 program. You're trying to convince an NFL Hall of Famer, one of the greatest safeties of all time, to come work for you. And you don't have the audacity to clean his office. That lets me know some things about the organization, about the communication. within this university. There's for sure blame on both sides, because I don't know that in a relationship, the best thing to do is to go public with your beef. Usually if you have those issues, they're better taken care of in private, because A, it's a trust thing. Look, hey, I love you. I respect you. I don't need to trash you in front of everyone. I want to get this done. No pun intended. But as a result of this headbutting, and as a result of the expletive-filled social media videos, Bethune-Cookman University has elected not to hire Ed Reed. Again, I think there's blame on both sides here. Ed Reed doesn't need to make the videos, but if you're this university and you're trying to hire an NFL Hall of Famer, you're not going to clean his office. You're not going to at least try and clean up a little bit to try and convince him. Dude, I feel like we have become so entitled as a people that we're like, you should just accept me as I am, because I am. And whatever I want to do and however I want to be, you owe me that. Kate, there's truth in loving people where they are, but there's also truth in cleaning up to look better, to try to attract people to come work for you. It's not you're so entitled that you should just say, oh, well, you owe me this. You should just come and work here. And if you don't want to work here because it's dirty, then that's on you. Again, don't need to go public with the videos, but I would be willing to bet he probably had beef with administration before that. And so this video about the trash everywhere was just to take a shot at them in public. As of yesterday, there are at least 20 players that have signed a petition to bring Ed Reed back as the coach, because I guess these kids must have really liked him. I do think there is in terms of, we've been talking about coaching a lot, right? We talked about Kyle Shanahan, we talked about Brian Dable, we talked about Sean McDermott, but there's one coach in the NFL that is not getting any credit at all, and I think it's a disappointment. That man's name is Doug Pederson. Doug Pederson is the least talked about coach in the NFL. Let's just think about it for a second. Okay, what do we know about Doug Pederson? Just the highlights. We know two. The first one is Doug Pederson took Carson Wentz and Nick Foles to a Super Bowl, won that Super Bowl, and beat Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Again, tell me one person who was on that team. I'll wait. Besides Fletcher Cox and Nick Foles. I think Jay Ajayi might have been on that team. I think Boston Scott might have been on that team. I don't even know who. The point I'm trying to make to you is you don't know who was on that team because Doug Pederson coached very well. Doug Pederson won a Super Bowl in Philly. Back in a time, I think because of that Super Bowl, we look at Philly differently. But at the time, we were saying that Philly was one of the most dysfunctional organizations in football, which was true. Doug Pederson won a Super Bowl anyway. And then, the year following the absolute meltdown in Jacksonville, that tropical storm being named Urban Meyer, Doug Pederson takes him to the playoffs. You do realize that last year the Jacksonville Jaguars were 3-14. They won 3 football games. Then this year, 9-8. They won 6 more games and won a playoff game. What do you want to tell me about Doug Pederson now? You realize that in the last 15 years, the Jaguars have won more than 8 games twice. Doug Pederson did that in his first year. He took the worst team in the NFL, took them to the playoffs his first year, following an absolute tragic coaching debacle with Urban Meyer. That same 15-year time span, they've only had 2 seasons worth positive point differentials, did in his first year. Last year they won 3 games. They had a negative 207 point differential. Doug Pederson is one of the best coaches in the league. He's definitely a top 10 coach. The coaches I would put ahead of him are Andy Reid, Bill Belichick, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay probably, even though jury's still out on that one. Pete Carroll maybe. Robert Salah. But maybe not even him. Doug Pederson is definitely a top 10 coach in the NFL and maybe even higher. The funny thing about it is, guess where he coached offensive coordinator for 3-4 years before he went to Philadelphia? Kansas City, which means his head coach was who? Andy Reid. Which also makes you think, because, I mean, coaching usually comes in trees and in waves, and it usually stems from the same guy, right? Kirby Smart, Jeremy Pruitt, Mel Tucker, all these guys, Lane Kiffin, all these guys come from where? Saban. Huh. Interesting. Doug Pederson, Andy Reid. Eric Bieniemy, Andy Reid. The fact that Doug Pederson's been so successful in just a short time as an NFL coach with so little makes me think that Eric Bieniemy probably could do just as good of a job. All right, last story. This one's the one I'm most excited about. Sorry to save it to last, but I feel like it's one that we all know. So a lot of times in life, there's a lot of people we call crazy. They look like a weirdo. Look like they just don't really fit in with society, right? But a lot of times that happens because you don't have the right boss or the right life situation or the right opportunity. A lot of times they call you a weirdo and they call you crazy. That's right before they call you a legend. We talked to Chicken Egg a little bit earlier. I think Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are the perfect example. I don't know which one came before the other. Obviously, Andy Reid was incredibly talented. But he was struggling when he was in Kansas City there for a little bit before Pat Mahomes got there. And Patrick Mahomes, for as much as he could sling the ball down the field at Texas Tech, couldn't really do a whole lot. They didn't win games when he was there. I really think that a lot of these coaching quarterback discussions that we have, like when we say, oh, well, was it Tom Brady or was it Bill Belichick? A lot of these, I think, come down to it's neither one. They were the perfect fit. I think Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are the perfect fit. Because if you look at the type of plays that Andy Reid runs, when he was running that stuff, when he was running that stuff years ago, people were like, okay, what are you doing? That doesn't work here. That's XFL. That's Arena Football League stuff. That doesn't work here. A lot of times in life, you look crazy even though you're really talented, and that's just because you haven't been given the right situation yet. So this is just like a little hype-up speech. A lot of you are really talented at what you do. You just don't have someone who believes in you yet, and you're not in the right fit. You're not in the right situation. And I think Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are a perfect example of that. Andy Reid looked a little crazy. Like, we knew he was good at coaching offense, but we were also like, okay, what are you doing? And then he gets Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes flourishes, the Chiefs flourish, and Andy Reid flourishes. That's because they are the perfect storm. Andy Reid is going to go down as one of the best offensive head coaches of all time. And I think Patrick Mahomes wins three more Super Bowls, probably could go down as the greatest quarterback of all time. Definitely would probably be the best quarterback of all time. But it's a marriage from heaven. And the cool thing about it is, while it's from heaven, the Chiefs have become the new villains of the NFL, which is dope. Because every great story needs a villain. And as soon as the Patriots went down, we've been short on villains for a while. So it's cool to see Mahomes back. That being said, Mahomes came up with an ankle injury against the Jaguars on Saturday. I'm not worried about Mahomes on an ankle. I do think, though, when you're going into the Bengals, who have had your number for months and months and years, it's a little concerning that you're going to have, like, the dope thing about Patrick Mahomes is that he's not that athletic, but somehow he is completely unsackable. He's got one of those, my mom got the new Palisade, and has one of those like overhead cameras where you can literally see everything around you. Patrick Mahomes is that in real life. I don't know how he sees everything, but he does. He's unsackable. It'll be fun to, I think this makes it a more even matchup, which is guaranteed to give us an all-time classic in the AFC Championship. That's going to be our time for today. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for making me a part of your Monday. We're going to keep it rolling. Go follow me on Instagram and TikTok at BHammerTime. Go follow us on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube at Trophy Room Radio. We're going to keep posting content. Also, just keep an eye out. We are going to be doing Game Changers giveaway here soon. So keep an eye out and go apply for that when it comes up. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your Monday. I will see you on Wednesday. Cheers. Whoa.